Cool. So let's get started. And Hap, I'm really happy to have you here. You're very well known in the world, I would say, and your brand has conquered the hearts of so many outdoor lovers. So why don't you just briefly introduce yourself, tell me what you've done before, and tell me what you are working at now.
Sure. My name is Hap Klopp. I'm located in the San Francisco area, actually Berkeley, California, and I've been here ever since I graduated from Stanford Business School. At that point, I basically converted my thinking to start a company called the North Face. And I did it because I couldn't work for anybody else, and I didn't believe the way the real world worked was the way it should be. I believed in things like no planned obsolescence. I believed in sustainability. I believed in paying women the same as men. I believed in having a triple bottom line for the business. And I didn't see all those things. And so what I decided is if I couldn't work for anybody else, what I would do is start a company of my own around something I knew something about. And the out of doors was something that I did know about because I grew up in a place called Spokane, Washington, about 900 miles from Stanford. And outdoors was what you did. That was part of your life. We didn't have a lot of professional sports that you watched. And so it was something that was natural. And by participating in it, I developed not only a love for it, but also a belief, and is best stated by Thoreau, I think, which is in nature is a preservation of the earth. And I really believed that that was the case. If people went to the wilderness, they went to the outdoors, they were energized, spiritually filled, and they came back and they could do something about that. And the time we did this was 1968, which was as volatile a time as we have right now. There were riots in the streets. It was anti-Vietnam War. There was a free speech movement, but there was a great belief that an individual could make a difference. And I thought that not only could an individual do it, but a company could do it if it had the right precepts. So I did that. I ran the company for 20 years and sold it. And then subsequent to that time, I've been involved in a variety of things. I like to say I divide my time up into thirds, but there's about 4/3 there. 1/3 is I'm teaching. I teach adjunct at a various number of universities, Stanford, Cal, USF, and I teach on a regular basis at Hult University that has campuses in Dubai, London, Boston, San Francisco, and Shanghai. And I teach about entrepreneurship. I teach about global product development, branding, about Silicon Valley and the attitude there.
And you also wrote a couple of books on that, how to succeed and how to fail.
Right. Yeah. The success was called Conquering the North Face, Adventure and Leadership. And the failure book was called Almost. And I use stories or parables there because I find that more interesting than trying to have 7 habits of highly effective people or whatever. And so you can read it for entertainment or you can read it for the message there. But the idea is that you can learn on my mistakes, OPM, other people's mistakes, other people's money. That's the best way to do it. So if people read them, they'll get those ideas. I share those in that. Then I do some speaking around the globe. So that's kind of a third of what I do.
I'm still waiting for my signed copies of those books.
Okay, we'll get it to you.
We shall. So Hap, in the last 50 years, you sold the North Face around 30 years ago, right? And you've been the president for 20 years. So what do you see in the world right now? What has changed in terms of healthy lifestyle attitude in the world in the last 50 years?
Well, there's an accelerating pace of change in society. Things are moving at a faster and faster rate. I don't think I could have launched the North Face the way we did. We grew sort of organically, and we thought we were going rapidly. We were doubling each year, but from when you start at zero, doubling is a pretty easy thing to do. But in today's world, every company is born globally. Every business is global, and the digital world has you online 24 hours a day, and it has you responding to people, and it can take over your life. And it does in many cases. And people no longer have some of the freedom to do things. I always joke about the fact that in the old days, you get a letter, and if it really pissed you off, you just wouldn't answer it for a while. In today's world, you get an email, and if you don't respond, they come right back to you. So you have a tendency just to quickly answer something, not in depth, and maybe not with as much forethought as you have.
And so
But the reality,
how does that relate to the world of fitness? Does that mean we have less time to go outdoors?
well, what happens is people don't have as much time to go deep into the wilderness as they once did. And so what you see is a lot of shorter hikes, walks, biking, things close to home and inner city. Also, a lot of things have moved to the cities. Frankly, I think they will move out as a result of COVID, but we can come back to that later on. But a lot of people have moved into the cities. But what you're finding is that because of this, there's an incredible amount of stress that people have that didn't exist previously, that is artificial, superimposed on people's life, and is forcing them to look at things in a different way, looking at how do I take care of myself physically, and actually do it through organized activities. When I started North Face, a lot of people were basically dropping out, moving to the woods. They didn't think as much about being in business. They didn't think as much about building unicorn companies. They didn't think about stock options and things. They thought more about a balanced lifestyle. Recently, and I say recently over the last 20 years or so, there's a real shift towards people's focus being almost on material gains. And like everything, there's a counterpoint to that. And the counterpoint is what I'm interested in. And that is, how do people balance their life? How do they deal with that? And it's been a struggle for most.
We have reached the counterpoint where people start to become way more aware of their health and kind of their own well-being instead of, just running business and doing the number stuff.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's happening 100%. It's happening one by one, individual by individual. But, they say shooting stars are most visible just before they extinguish. I think that when you realize you're going to lose something, or you realize you're losing something, it suddenly calls it to mind, and the importance of taking care of oneself. And so I see that happening. As I said, it happens individual to individual, but you can see lots of new segments of the market develop over time. In the outdoors, which I was familiar with, we just went outdoors. And then there was kind of mountaineering, and then bouldering showed up, and then there was ice climbing, and then there was rock climbing, and then there's gym climbing, all designed around an activity, but also around health and wellness of doing that. And if you look at it, yoga became something that's there. Personal trainers and fitness have come up as a way to do. The biking market is fractured into many elements. You have mountain bikes, you have road bikes, you have people just biking for weekend exercise that are out there. And so all of those things have come, as I said, individual by individual, probably because they're tailored to the user need. Design thinking is always talking about user needs. Well, not everybody wants to be a road biker, but they might be really enthused about being a mountain biker. One is more of an adrenaline activity. Both of those will make you incredibly fit, but there's a different mentality that the consumer has. So a number of these things have popped up that address the interest that the actual consumer wants. And as they've expanded, more people have been brought under that tent.
So the number of activities has become way more diverse, and there's lots of things we can choose from. I also sometimes do bouldering, and I really love it because you cannot do anything else when you're climbing, in comparison to a gym where you can still watch TV and, doing your kind of couple of exercises. So it's all about, for me, it's all about focus in the future, because, we get distracted more and more. And probably some of the people will use sports to get more focused on what they're doing right this minute. So it's kind of meditation, actually.
Mm-hmm. Your point you made there is really a good one, which is effectively, you have to think about outcomes. And perhaps when you're young like you, even younger than you,
I'm getting older.
There's a feeling of omnipotence, that you're going to go on forever. Don't have to worry much about what you eat. Don't have to worry very much about what you do. You're just going to take care of yourself. And then as you get older, you realize that it has to be an intentioned move on your part to be able to maintain that. And if you do, it pays dividends along the way. If you don't, maybe you're lucky and you have just the right genes, but I'd say 95% of people don't have just the right genes, and they need to augment it by taking considered care of themselves.
Which brings us to genes. That's a perfect point. You know, before that, you've built a company which brought people outside, outdoors, in the wilderness. Now you're working on the product Reviv, which
Yes.
focuses on genes and kind of brings our attention inside of ourselves. Could you tell us a little bit more about this company Reviv that you are a part of?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Reviv is a company which initially started out providing IV drip therapy in clinics around the globe. And there's roughly 90 clinics right now in 60 different countries. And what you can do is go in and have an IV drip that is tailored to an outcome that you want, whether it has to do with health and wellness, whether it has to do with sport, whether that has to do with recovery from illness, whatever. Dehydration, a simple example. And in doing that, you can accelerate things. And Reviv's idea is to be a health and wellness company based on democratizing healthcare. It's not well known by a lot of people, but healthcare represents a huge portion of the GDP of all the major countries. US is crazy. 17.3% of our GDP is devoted to health and healthcare. And then what you have in Europe is closer to 9%. The difference in the US is the amount paid by individuals. But the result of it is that it's very inefficient. It's basically healthcare designed to take care of you when you're ill, as opposed to being proactive and taking care of yourself by your plan. And one of the ways you reduce the cost, which everybody talks about, and improve the outcome is effectively by being proactive. And Reviv's idea is democratize it, give you the tools, give you the information to be able to actually choose an outcome that you want and tailor your performance to it. So Reviv, as I said initially, it was IV drip therapy, but then it's evolved into having two other products that they're providing. The second one they call Aurora, but basically it is DNA testing. And the DNA testing is done to provide you with all the information that you need about the foods that you eat and the pharma that you might take and how your body reacts to it. Traditionally, people follow just guidelines that are designed one for all. People talk about the Mediterranean diet being great, or they talk about the French paradox, the French being able to drink wine and cheese and it doesn't affect them. And
being able to drink vodka and dance on the table.
Yeah, but the reality is each of us responds differently to each of these things, and it relates to our DNA. So by knowing what your DNA is, you then can determine, based on an outcome you might want to choose, whether it's losing weight or whether it's longevity or dealing with a variety of illnesses ranging up to cancer, you can choose a diet that fits your needs. And so they generate a book that tells you how every single food, individually and in combination, will work with your specific DNA. They also can tell you how you respond to pharma. And just to give you an example of that, chemotherapy is a treatment for cancer. And it works because it kills cells. But it is a very blunt instrument that doesn't work very well. The reality is chemotherapy of some types doesn't work for some people. So a doctor shouldn't prescribe that for you because it would just harm you, not help you. However, without DNA analysis, you wouldn't know that. And that's just one example, but all the pharma reacts in that way. And so people say, okay, I want a natural diet. I want something. That's great. They say that I want natural supplements. That's great, but which ones? And so the idea is to provide that. Now, they added one other thing to it, which is during the COVID crisis, to be able to help the society around them, because they're committed to that, they did COVID testing for first responders and developed testing. Subsequently, they've added testing to what they're doing, but leading towards digitization information, where they're going to be providing digital health passports for people so that they can travel more freely, so they can go to work at a job, so people know what they have. Because when you see this fall, which we will see, people are going to get flu. Is the flu COVID or is a flu a standard flu or something else?
And here we have the European view as well. Europeans are also very, very concerned about the use of privacy and private data. So don't you think that could also be a step towards kind of a health dictatorship?
I don't think it has to be. And one of the ways, we talked about that quite a bit at Reviv, but one of the ways we decided to do that was, first of all, is allow people on the DNA to choose how much of that information is private and how much is distributed. And effectively what you do is change the cost. If you say, fine, let everybody have that information, then your cost is going to be quite low. And if you say, listen, I want all of that, I just want it for myself, and I don't want to distribute it to anybody for any reason, then you would pay more. So it allows people, it sort of democratizes the choice of what you're going to do as a way of doing that. But the reality is, if you see that information in the aggregate, as opposed to an individual, you can make decisions that are quite wise. That's like contact tracing that's going on right now. The contact tracing, you need to know where things are going to go before you suddenly impose restrictions or ask people to do something. Otherwise, you have these, again, blunt instruments that governments are imposing on people. So there is a challenge that you have, and that is whenever you provide data, data can be used or misused in a lot of ways. I mean, it's not well known, but there's a couple of DNA companies. One is called 23andMe, and the other one is called, but people say, oh, that's for my ancestry. I think ancestry.com is another one. Mm-hmm. And it isn't. It's a collection of your information. That's what they're doing. They're selling that information to pharma. So they give it.
What makes Reviv different?
The first one is that Reviv allows you to actually define what you're going to do with that information. So you have it or others have it. The second thing is it allows you to actually set up a drip therapy if you want it, a diet if you want it, a pharma regimen if you want it, that you, as I say, you democratize. Now you can choose what you want, and you say, okay, my outcome is I desire to lose weight, or my outcome is I desire to be better at sport of some sort, or my desired outcome is that I want to have skin that's more vibrant and real. You can determine all of these by what you do, and they provide you that information so that you can choose that. And then you can go into their clinics, and you can have things, you can have supplements that would be specifically designed for you. You don't just go into the pharmacy and look for supplements and say, oh, these are natural, so they must be good. You go in and say, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z to be able to do it. So their goal is to provide democratization to the health process so you can be proactive in choosing what you're going to do.
That's a very interesting point, because, today we have lots of information on how to live healthy lives. And to be honest, you usually need much to do that. Like, you have to have the right nutrition, you have to drink enough, you have to sleep, you have to, not have way too much stress, move, and kind of have fun in life. The basics are very simple. Still, we have over 40% of adults in the world who are obese. So obviously information is not enough. Obviously, it's way more kind of the behavior change problem that we're facing. How do you think can DNA testing tackle this problem?
Well, it either can make it more difficult or it can make it easier. It can make it more difficult is if you're overwhelmed with the information, you won't do anything with it. And I think that's one of the problems we have to date. People know, okay, all of these things are good for me. I don't know exactly why. It's easier for me just to opt out and I'll go do whatever I want to do. Similarly, if you generate this DNA information, you have a book that's this thick. Are you going to read a book that thick? Not since War and Peace have you read a book that thick.
I have.
The reality.
All Russians have to do that.
Yeah, I understand that. But they're disciplined, and not everybody.
Get a thing.
But the net of it is that they can provide ways to distill that information down for you to do a proactive development of a regimen. And when you do that, then somebody said, okay, and you have to talk about outcomes. One of my best friends is a leading person in decision analysis, and he's written a book that came out recently. It's called Nudge. And the idea of that is it's for as opposed to an academic, which he is, and many PhDs and whatever, but he's trying to do it for the common person. How do you change what you're doing, and in his case, nudge you towards the right decision? And his books are about smart decision making. Well, what we're trying to do is, the first thing of smart decision making is allow you to see the connection between what you do and what the outcome is going to be. And the outcome in terms of good and bad. I'm one that believes positive is what motivates people to change as opposed to negative. Tell somebody, you know, smoking is not good for you. They say, yeah, but I like it. But if you say, listen, you know, this is a life that you can have if you don't smoke, and this is how it's going to lead to somebody. To me, that becomes much more.
Well,
would you repeat that, please?
do with DNA testing as well, kind of behavior change, motivation.
Yeah, yeah. I think ultimately what you want to do is put information in front of people so they can make rational decisions, and information in front of people in a simple enough way that you don't have to have PhDs to be able to understand it, that you can operate in a great way. What I'm seeing right now, and I'm very encouraged by it, is the care that people are taking with their children, more than they're taking with themselves. They may be obese, but the diets that children are getting, the health that they're getting, and I'm talking about where they have the money to be able to afford it. Unfortunately, in the areas where there isn't any money, it's survival, the diet, the lifestyle is not very good. But where people have the luxury of living, as many people do in the Western world right now, and in China and in Japan, where they have the luxury of choosing what they eat, choosing where they go, choosing what their exercise are, there is a great effort to make sure that the children experience life in the right way. Much more so than there was long ago when I was growing up. It was, you know, you were kind of the outlier. We did it and had a lifestyle. We didn't think a lot about it, but it was a very healthy lifestyle that would exist. We hiked, we skied.
That if you're speaking of kids,
yeah.
Do you think that one of the possible future scenarios would be a newborn gets tested and the physicians can tell you what kind of sports activities he or she has to do, what kind of, you know, nutrition is good or bad for them, and other stuff?
Well, shouldn't they? I mean, of course, you're going to have a better outcome if that's the case. I mean, most of the things are done just by, old wives' tales. This is what's right. Well, it isn't right for everybody. As I was saying earlier, DNA tells you what foods work with you. I mean, they find out with kids that they're lactose intolerant, or they find out that they have peanut allergies or whatever. And that's a lengthy story, but it could be a variety of things they're dealing with. But the reality is you should know that rather than have an anaphylactic fit or something as a way to prove that or whatever. If you know what those elements are, you can describe a future for yourself, and that's what you want. And what we all seek is freedom to be able to accomplish the goals we set for ourselves. Some people's goals are very large, others are very modest, but the reality is you can only accomplish that if you have the freedom to be able to choose that course. At the heart of that freedom, we're not talking about politics or any of those others. Those come in. At the heart of it, though, is taking care of your health. Because if you don't take care of your health, you aren't going to be able to accomplish any of the things you want, whether you want to be a great athlete or whether you want to, frankly, just be somebody who's academically very strong, if you aren't there. When I was in the
cheeseburgers every night.
When I was in the 6th grade or 7th grade, I wrote a paper on the interrelationship between athletic and academic activities. And if you go back, the paper was pretty weak, I must admit, but what does a 6th grader generate? But starting with the Greeks and Romans, there's lots of information about how those two things work together. And if you want to have peak performance intellectually, it is advantageous, in fact necessary, to have a healthy athletic background as well. I'm not talking about competitive sports, although I love those. I'm talking about wellness and health lifestyle.
Yeah, they said in healthy body, there's healthy mind. And don't you think that, we had the ancient Greeks and Romans where they basically had the cult of the body, right? And the cult of the individual. Then Renaissance came where the individual again came into the center of the attention. We had the anthropocentric view of the world. Don't you think that we are about to experience kind of the second Renaissance with human health and human well-being being the center of it?
I think so. Probably for the wrong reason we're doing it. The wrong reason is the lifestyle that people have adopted, they realize is not coming up with a good outcome. You know, and you go to the healthcare we're talking about and how much is being spent there on this post reaction to the way we've lived our lives. People are not any happier than they were before. They're less healthy than they were before. And the lifestyle that they had, which came oftentimes from amassing a lot of money and having great jobs and whatever, and I'm talking about not everybody, of course, but the people who are well off, able to do that, have realized that that doesn't work. And so that when I said it's the wrong thing, you should intellectually figure that out in advance. But I think we're using deductive as opposed to inductive reasoning. And the deductive reasoning is it doesn't work. What we've been doing doesn't work. It doesn't make me feel better, doesn't make me feel energized, doesn't allow me to live longer, doesn't, in fact, it allows me to live a shorter life, and the quality of my life is decreasing. So through that deductive reasoning, a lot of people are now searching. And there are, fortunately, a lot of tools that didn't exist long ago in terms of information, whether it's online. Look at COVID and the number of people working out who have private trainers. Look at things like Peloton and other exercise where there's huge things. These are unicorn companies that are growing out of the need of people to be fit. And again, they're tailoring it to their own need, but they're doing it because they're realizing the lifestyle that people have been leading, which is hectic, eating too many of the wrong foods, drinking too many of the wrong drinks, lacking exercise. All those things are not necessarily making for people to be healthier and happier.
Yeah. So does that mean that what you said previously is that, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, we were going outside into the wilderness? Today, it seems kind of, too big of an effort. That partially explains the success of the companies like Peloton and the other home fitness companies that tell you, don't leave your home, we have everything for you, and you can still feel connected to others by doing live streaming sessions. So what's next? Are we all going to be stuck in our homes with home fitness trainers? What's happening? What do you see?
Well, the good news is we had COVID. And COVID is telling people you can't live inside all the time. And so what you're seeing is a huge boom in people going out and exercising, whether it's walking, whether it's biking, or whatever. It isn't a deep movement into the wilderness, but there is a significant increase. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I've been looking at them, of people searching out activities that are more lifestyle oriented. And so rather than being on the Peloton in their house and never seeing anybody else, they're actually going out on a bike and they're going somewhere around that local area. The bike business is booming at this time. Right now, the major problem that bike manufacturers have is they can't make enough because the people want more than they have.
Which is quite nice.
Additionally, if you look and you talk with companies like in the US, the company REI, they are virtually out of goods for local walking and hiking, whether it's camp stoves or whatever. They joke about it being, the toilet paper of the next level, where everybody ran out of toilet paper. They're running out of items and they can't get it. Now, this is not crampons and ice screws and picks for people going up mountains. This is about things that you can do locally. And I say locally, within a reasonable drive or reasonable walk or reasonable bike from where you live. So I think that's the next phase. And I think COVID has really alerted people, one, to the need to do it. And it started out not just at the physical level, but they realized for their mental health, they need to do these activities. And again, they're finding what we knew when we started the North Face and we were building that, which is in wilderness is the preservation of the earth. There's a preservation of oneself also by going out there. when you have a hike, which is, let's say it's a 2-mile hike, that's not a very big deal, but it's a big deal when you come back. You feel much better about it, and you actually feel poorly if you don't go out, if you miss that walk that you're going to do, both physically and mentally.
I was just wondering, how does the search for, or, looking for fresh air, looking for mental clarity and for some regeneration outdoors play together with going inside of the human body and doing the DNA testings? How would this interplay look like in the future for you?
Well, I think regimens will be developed by people, and maybe it's things like artificial intelligence that'll do it, or you will use something to be able to bring together that program. I would like to sit down, even for myself, and take some of the input that we have and some of the things I'm doing and map out something and play scenarios. What if scenarios? If I did this, if I did that, what was going to happen? If I could deal with that in that way, I would be making more efficient decisions and better decisions that I have. And I think it'll be easy access, and it'll be on your phone or be on a computer if you have it, but it's not something that you have to spend a lot of time researching. You can develop it. And then you have all sorts of tracking devices which will help you monitor so that you get feedback. The feedback is really important to people to maintain a regimen that they're doing. Is anything happening as a result of what I'm doing? And historically, there haven't been a lot of feedback, and they're saying, listen, if you go on this diet or this workout regimen for 6 months, you're really going to be better. Well, at the end of a month, they start losing the enthusiasm that got them into that. But now, if you look at the fitness trackers, if you look at the number of steps on your phone that you took, all of these things tell you on an instant basis, because we all now have computers in our pockets that provide and collect this information. There's sensors that exist out there that tell you about your body in every way. And it's just at the start of that. But the Internet of Things is, when it relates to clothing, relates to what you wear, what you put on your feet when you hike, will be giving you feedback that tells you how you're responding to what you're doing. It will give you positive reinforcement for the activities you have, and it will also give you some measurements that you will be able to use to craft or change what you're doing going forward. So I think that if you know about your DNA and you map a program based on your DNA, what you're trying to do, then you can map a program through AI and computers and even on your phone of, this is what I need for my outcome, from the outcome I'm choosing.
So what I hear you saying is that DNA and understanding your DNA will serve as kind of a basis for all future activities and your decisions.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about it because other people can collect that DNA. It's available. We just don't have access to enough information. I do believe that many of the bad decisions we make in life are because we don't have the proper information. And that proper information is now available. And if you look at DNA analysis, the cost of DNA analysis, say 10 years ago, was maybe $1 million a person to be able to take it. The cost today of that is in hundreds of dollars. I'm using US currency, but it's euros 130 or whatever. That cost is going to continue to go down. It's going to be that everybody can have that information. You're talking about $50, $30 in the future. This might be 10 years out, but if it only costs $30 to have that analysis compared to everything we have, why wouldn't people have that information? And so now we're putting information in front of people. Now it becomes actionable and how you deal with it. And you can choose where you want to go. That's the joy in life. You don't have to do things just because you read in a book that the Mediterranean diet is good for you. Maybe you're not from the Mediterranean. Somebody once told me, when a doctor I was dealing with, he says, Klopp, doesn't sound Mediterranean to me. you best act as if you're from northern Europe.
What I hear you saying is that we are entering the age of enlightened individuals who have the information they need to decide on their health outcomes.
Right.
And the question is how do you see, for example, professional sports and DNA testing blending together in the future?
Well, people argue about that. Are we going to create super people? Or are we actually going to start dictating how people develop and what they're doing? I would say that the first step is the one we're seeing. And if you look at it, professional athletes constantly are working at developing the right diet, the right regimen, or whatever. David Beckham is a regular visitor to the Reviv clinic in Manchester because of what he's trying to do in terms of his outcome. The athletes of today eat better, the really successful ones. They eat better, they sleep better as a result of what they're doing their time. They exercise the right muscles for what they're trying to accomplish. All this information is out there. Now, are we going to get to a point where they're actually going to start constructing people's DNA in advance so that you have super children coming out? I think that can be done. I think that it will probably happen ahead of legislation about it, because laws tend to be very slow in responding to it. And I don't think that, I think there's moral and ethical issues that will have to be addressed as we get towards that. But it certainly, you can start with something very benign, which is if you have one of these exotic diseases, which comes from one or two of the genetic defects, we can stop that from happening. Well, that's I wouldn't say benign, that's probably the wrong word to use it, but I mean, that is one that is for good. But then you can say, well, also, if we add to this other gene, suddenly you're going to be 7 feet tall. That starts really adjusting things in the future. So it's going to require some moral and ethical interpretation. My concern is that, as I said, laws and governments tend to respond to as opposed to anticipate. And as a result, we're probably going to see some things that happen that we're not going to be very happy with.
Yeah, that's interesting. We're running out of time. I would love to speak more with you. But my last question would be, if you had to start the North Face all over again today, equipped with the knowledge of modern technology and the possibilities that technology has, what kind of company would that be?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, you have to start with what's the DNA of the company. And we always figure out the DNA. That's what a brand's all about. That's why it's such an iconic brand. We always held to the DNA of the company, and every touch point was out there. And our touch point was three things. One, disruption. We wanted to disrupt the markets we're in, everything, every way, the way we dealt with our employees. We had a lifetime warranty and whatever. The second one was quality, making the highest quality product that exists. And the third one was what we call triple bottom line, which basically was an equal commitment to the planet, to the people, and to profits, and that none was over the others. So any company that I would develop now would have those same three things in them, and they would deal with it. And superimposed over that was the hubris of believing we were going to change the world. And we were going to change the world in terms of making it better for everybody. And that, I know, sounds Pollyanna and whatever, but I still subscribe to it, and I'm not going to vary it. No reason. I don't have another story, so I'll stick with it. To me, health and wellness is the big movement and area where I would be involved. Why? One is the big need that exists out there. As I mentioned the numbers before, the amount of the GDP that goes into dealing with things retroactively is not sustainable and has to be changed. Also, from the standpoint of the number of people who are denied access to the information they need. And so I would develop a company, frankly, because my love is always the outdoors. It would be a company that would relate to the outdoors, utilizing things around health and wellness, as opposed to climbing peaks or river running, rafting, or rowing a boat across the ocean, which was kind of a goal-driven way of doing it. The goals now would shift more towards a lifestyle. Goals would be allow people to maximize their own potential.
So maybe I would just put this question another way. If you were to develop a piece of apparel or outdoor apparel today, what kind of technology would you use to do that?
Well, I would think about cooling and heating apparel. I would think about things that are intuitive, that would allow you to go there. Some would be materials that automatically adjust your body when you do something. The traditional approach, if you're overheating, in a jacket, you have pit zips and you have ways of opening it up and whatever. But what if your clothing could automatically respond to that and be able to deal with that? One of the things we did to disrupt the camping industry is we made everything significantly lighter in weight. We took aircraft aluminum, made tent poles and pack frames. We took parachute cloth and made sleeping bags and tent tops and funky clothing. But it was 50% lighter than anything existed on the market. Similarly, now make your clothing proactive. Make your clothing anticipate what you're doing. That can come from sensors, that can come from exotic materials, materials that adjust so they cool or heat, which are the two immediate things that you have. Clothes which actually tell you what is happening real time so that you don't have to, for example, dehydration. Everybody who gets dehydrated did that because they don't know, their body doesn't tell them soon enough that they need water, that they need liquids in their system. And by the time they know that, it's too late. Professional athletes know that. That's why they overindulge in liquids before they're doing something, because they know the body won't feed it back. Well, with sensors, you can feed that back. And the easiest sensor is going to be on your clothing, particularly base layer clothing, which is close to your body.
Which means that technology would kind of still help us to understand ourselves and the way our body works better.
Yeah, and I say, don't be afraid of technology. Don't be afraid of knowledge. Knowledge is liberator. It's not a confining thing.
That's perfect. Hap, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that. And I hope that the listeners of the FitTech Summit FIBO Edition would appreciate your insights as well.